Welcome to the Millionaire Hairstylist, where our mission is to improve the financial well-being of creative professionals. This episode is a conversation between myself and our founder, celebrity hairstylist Cash Lawless. Cash, as you may know, runs several companies across multiple industries: real estate, e-commerce, transportation, and of course, the Millionaire Hairstylist. And in a moment of year-end reflection, he wrote a list called 19 Mistakes I Made in My Businesses in 2023. And this episode is our conversation exploring that list. If you are a business owner, if you are a creative, if you are an entrepreneur, if you work for yourself, I don't care what experience you have, I promise you there'll be multiple items on this list that you will hear and say, oh boy, I have made that mistake. And the conversation we have around both the mistakes made and also the solutions that can be explored to steer in the right direction for you, your business, your career will be, I think, very helpful to listen to. Let's get right into it. Here's 19 business mistakes I made in 2023. Cash, it's funny because I don't want to say you were taken hostage over New Year's, but you kind of were, because you told me, you said, oh, by the way, I'm going on a cruise. I thought, that doesn't sound like you. You didn't say a sailing trip. That sounds very much like you. You said, I'm going on a cruise. And then you said, I'll have limited access to internet. I was like, that really doesn't sound like you. And then 3 days into said crew, when you did get internet, you messaged me and you said, I'm miserable. This is terrible. I can't get on the internet. And I did this right after the new year at the worst possible time.
Yeah.
But something good came out of not having access to the internet and being in the middle of the ocean. And I thought that's what we'd explore in this conversation.
Something did come out. And, maybe I was being a bit dramatic, but
you think?
There's every time I would get on the internet, it would put me back into this mindset where I want to be doing work. Like, I want to be involved in the things we're doing. I love what I do. I love each of my businesses. I love all the people in my businesses. And so I want to be there and I want to be in the action. Maybe that's a slight addiction. Miserable would be an overstatement. I actually had a wonderful time with my family. And yes, something really good came out. So on the trip, I knew that I wanted to set some time aside for reflection, and which I had been doing for a month prior. But
yes,
I was in a jazz club and I was sitting there and I was like, gosh, just thinking with no phone access or anything like that. And so I started getting really clear on, like, vulnerable with myself and honest with myself about the prior year. And because the previous month I had been looking at reports and kind of like putting together what happened in the business, and I was getting really disappointed with the outcome because I had very lofty ambitions for 2023. I think very few of my goals were hit. Later on, when I looked at some of the real numbers once they were put together, it was like record year in leads, record year in revenue, record year in this. And I was like, there was tons of records set, but it just didn't quite get to where I wanted to go. And last year was one of the most challenging years for me in business because of that experience. It was a year spent in deep frustration. And so I'm sitting there and I just pulled out my phone and I was like, what are the things that I did wrong last year? Let me be really honest with myself. If I was going to screw up 2024, these are the things that I would do basically to intentionally sabotage the year. And that's something, Jordan, you've shared with me. It's a mental strategy I learned from you. Basically, like, what did I do last year that if I wanted to look the same, this is what I would do, basically.
Right. What would be the recipe for failure? If I wanted to do poorly in this relationship, in this business and whatever, what would I do to screw it up? It's a good mental exercise for sure. I learned that from someone. I definitely did not invent that, but yeah.
Well, I learned it from you. And so just kind of sitting there gave me some time, gave me hours to just think and just think and reflect. So I wrote down 19 fails in 2023 that I totally messed up on. These are mindsets that held me back. These are habits that held me back. These are philosophies and beliefs that held me back. And I think as I started writing, I started becoming more clear on all these mistakes that I was making. And then I realized one of the big mistakes is I don't take a lot of time to look at this. I am almost always in battle. I'm a type of person that's just kind of like drive. I just feel like I'm like my businesses. I'm in an F1 car taking really fast turns all the time. That's not to say I'm an F1 car driver that it's like operating at that speed, trying to use it. I'm not that cool and I'm not going that fast. And nor are my businesses growing that fast. But what I mean is I'm a driver in my businesses and I'm pushing for extreme performance.
And most founders are and sort of have to be. You don't get to build a business that has employees, has any form of revenue, 7-figure revenue, and not be someone that is just on top of it and pushing and driving. That is very much your personality and has been for as long as I've known you.
Yeah. And I embrace that about myself. I know my role. I know my strengths. There's like 2% of I always say this, there's like out of the 100% of things I could do, like 2% of them are my lane. And so I'm constantly trying to work to get toward operating in those as best I can and achieve high performance while having a great time and enjoying life. So I want to go through the fails, and maybe some of you guys will relate to some of these fails. And maybe you won't. Maybe there'll be 2 or 3 that really stick out to you. But in some way, I hope you find them somewhat helpful, because I think they shed a lot of light on how poorly I operated last year, both in my personal life, my mentality, my beliefs, my perspectives, and my mindsets. So number one,
before you do that, I just want to say a few things as a setup. I want to kind of like to hype this a little bit. Number one, this is the most self-reflect. When you sent this to me, I was bowled over because I've known you for a long time, Cash, and I think this was I know you pretty well. I think we know each other pretty well, and so there were some things you wrote down here that I was like, wow, that is so Cash, and also things that I didn't. I was so impressed and pleased that you are calling out about yourself. So that was, I think it's like so spot on in your self-reflection, which I think is that's hard to do. And I'm kind of both proud of you and inspired by that, because it is kind of hard to be really, really, really honest. And so you were in that respect. And then the other thing I'll say is I related to so many things on this list. And when I read it to my girlfriend, Julia, because we were talking about doing this in the podcast, she related to so many things on that list. So Cash, I'm going to go out on a limb and say people who are listening to this, it's not going to be 1 or 2 things. It's a lot of things on this list that people who are building anything, building a business, or even just growing their own careers will relate to. So that's my drum up. But please take us through your list.
Okay. So number 1 was I set too many goals. Way too many goals. There is either the goal or you don't have a goal, right? Having tons of goals is a way to fail at a lot of them. So that's one thing that I did that really set me out for frustration. And that's something I've done every year, is set too many goals. But this year, now that I have this many businesses and I'm investing in multiple businesses and I'm advising and coaching, and it's like, whoa, there's way too much going on. I said yes to too many things and too many people. In the past, I learned the power of yes when the value of my time was very low. And unfortunately, that became a habit that has still crept with me. I said yes to way too many things. Now I really have to weigh the value of every opportunity. So I heard this recently, like there's this massive YouTuber that gets like 10,000 opportunities or whatever. And he said yes to like 2. While I said yes to probably like 50 out of the 100%. 51 that I had, right?
Yeah.
So that was a big misstep this year. So 3, I tried being nice, and in turn, I failed to speak my mind and assert my opinion as I have in the past, when in my gut, I had a strong conviction. And I really believe that this was an attempt to be less of a hard-charging, ass type, a hard ass type, and really to let those in supporting roles make decisions independently. And that does not work when you also compromise on the quality of those in the supporting roles. So this year, I overcorrected with niceness and did not listen to my gut. I tried to be like, oh, what would you do? Here's some autonomy. But then I put people in the wrong roles, and which is a compromise I made, which I'll talk about. And that ultimately wound up leading to big mistakes and frustrations and the company going in directions I didn't want it to go. So
I'm not going to chime in on all of these for sake of time, but that's one I just want to hit on really quickly, which is there are always those moments in management and leadership where you want something done a certain way, but you also want autonomy in your team. And so you say, I'll just use like a simple example, like, hey, can you fold the napkins? And they do it in a way that you wouldn't do it. And you think like, oh, I could just let it slide because I want to be nice. And then you realize like 5 minutes later, or in this case, you realize at the end of the year, like I allowed too many people to fold the napkins the wrong way. And suddenly the business was not running the way it should have been run because I wanted the right thing, autonomy, people to work and feel independent. But at a certain point, there's a way we fold the napkins, and you got to fold the napkins that way. And so I got to hold the line. And that's just, especially about things that really matter.
Yeah. Jordan said it better than I did. Wish I could have written it like that.
Please continue.
Number 4, I spent the year as more of an emergency response unit than taking massive action toward a clear vision. I have said something in the past that I now believe to be untrue and irresponsible. I always said my goal in my businesses is to be like the fire department. I want the town to run as it does. And when there's an emergency, I'll step in.
Mm-hmm.
That is so irresponsible and downright dumb as the leader and visionary of a business. That was just a really, really bad mentality I had for years. And this was the year I discovered that. I do not want to be that. And so I am not going to be the fire department. I do not want to live a life responding to problems and allowing them to happen and then just being like, okay, what do I need to fix now? Really, really bad place. So being more proactive in that. So 5, I settled too many times for low quality talent in an attempt to build the team fast. That was one of the most expensive mistakes. I probably lost over $250,000 this year. And not probably, I think the total losses across all companies was like $1.8 million that we spent on bad talent. So that was a really bummer loss.
Hey, if you're enjoying this podcast and you want to further your financial education, you can do so for free. Go to millionairehairstylistpodcast.com, where you have an entire library of free financial lessons aimed at the well-being of creative professionals, including a lesson on why budgeting is a terrible, soul-sucking way to manage your money and why allocation is a much wiser system for managing your resources. Go to millionairehairstylistpodcast.com and sign up today.
All right, number 6. I abandoned perfectionism and high standards for the sake of progress. I really adopted this bullshit thing of progress over perfection, and I'm sure many other people have too. But what I understood it to mean was just move forward at all costs, no matter how good things are. And that was disastrous. And I think what I believe now is progress and the pursuit of perfection is actually what makes great businesses. Now, I understand perfection doesn't exist, but I pursue things all the time that don't exist. All the time. And they're great. I'd love to have the body of Arnold Schwarzenegger. And every day I go to the gym, not like Arnold, but imagine someone that's fit. He's
I get
massive.
You're saying.
I don't want to look like that.
What you're saying is there's a difference between stopping progress because it's not perfect and not pursuing perfection because progress is all that matters. So it's about the direction that you're working towards. Are things getting better? I mean, we talked about this in a social media episode recently. Are you paying attention and are your posts getting more engagement over time? If you're not growing, then it's like, what are you just posting just for the fun of it? So there has to be a balance between those two things without question.
So in so many regards, I dropped my standards and settled on things and was like, well, hey, if it's going to move us forward, like, let's just get let's get the person in that seat. Let's go. And it was always just, let's go. And the standards got dropped and the pursuit of excellence, which we can just call perfection. The pursuit of perfection is just like really high standards of excellence. Mm-hmm. We all know perfect isn't real. So perfect the pursuit of perfect has never stopped me from moving forward, but I have completely abandoned standards and the pursuit of perfection. And so now the new phrase for me is this whole like progress over perfection is garbage. I'm not going to do that anymore. It is progress and the pursuit of perfection, basically the highest standards you possibly can, and upholding those and not settling on those. When you know something's right in your business, you know what you do and you feel it in your gut, freaking stick to it. Number 7, I relied too much on external advice and failed to listen to my gut. That's a huge one. I really handed the keys over to experts. And what I found out is experts don't know as much as you think they do in a lot of cases. And sometimes you're so close to a problem, your gut is right. Now, I will say sometimes experts know a hell of a lot more than you do. And that does not mean I don't still pay coaches and hire consultants. I know now, listen to my gut. I know what I'm doing. I know where I'm going. I know what I want. I need to listen to myself. Okay, so number 8, spent too many hours on useless tasks that didn't move the needle. God, I was I spent so many hours. I tracked my time, and it was just like all of the admin hours that I spent that I just really did not need to was just ridiculous. And I have some changes that I'm making for that this year as well in my entire workflow. So number 9, I failed to effectively let go and outsource the bullshit because I wasn't clear on what I would do if I wasn't doing the bullshit, and was already so busy doing the bullshit, I made excuses for how I was too busy to outsource it and do meaningful work.
Woo! I need like a church fan. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay, now let's hover on that one for a second. That's a huge one, right? Because okay, we all have bullshit that we have to deal with.
Yes.
And it's important to outsource that bullshit, but sometimes we don't outsource, not because there's not someone to hand it off to, but because it's just easier to do the bullshit because at least you know how to do the bullshit.
Yep, exactly.
And it's satisfying.
It's always easier to do bullshit, and it's always
this is
more
why
satisfying.
this is why I procrastinate by doing dishes.
Yeah.
It's the same idea.
Yeah.
It's just
Same idea.
One is domestic and the other one is in a professional context. Wow, that hits.
All right. So that was multi-layered, and I needed to dig deep on that one, but it was just like I did not.
No kidding.
Like, why did I do all that stuff? You know, and I realized it was habit. It was habit to want to hit that dopamine hit. Like, yeah, I got that done. I got bullshit done. Is what I got done, and that's I fully intend to do less of that this year. So, number 10. I subconsciously avoided the hard work in exchange for the easy, busy work every day. There are things I know I could have done if I had no money left and if I had no comforts. I know how I acted when I was on my way out of homelessness, when I had a prospect. I know how like ravenous I was over opportunity and how I could do I felt like I could do any amount of work, any kind of work. I wasn't above anything. I remember I didn't know how to tile floor or anything like that, but my salon was going to shut down. And I was like, I need to make more money or I won't be able to pay rent. Like, this is when I first worked at a salon. I was like, I'll tile the floors. So for like 2 weeks, I'm on my knees, just tiling floors like 10 plus hours a day. And Shanna, I think she might have told this story on one of our podcast episodes, like brutal on the knees. But I was like, I don't care. I'll do it. That kept me working. And I lost that need. And I think it was a very, very high degree of comfort is what stole that from me. So
can I just ask to zero on that? What's an example of quote unquote hard work that you're going to put more emphasis on doing in 2024? What does that look like for you? What is the hard work versus the easy, busy work?
There was a ton of things that I could have done in my business, and examples would be very business specific. So for one, there was a project that I know on the other side of it, like this year, I put it off for a long time, building out sales funnels. I could hire that out, and I've tried to hire this stuff out before, but I needed to build the model and test the model myself. And the upside, if I did it when I ran the model, was like, okay, this could be an extremely significant impact, but oh my God, it's so much work. I have to get with the content team. I got to create the content, and I have to like pretty much like design. I have to go do the research on the internet and figure out like what are the hooks that are working. I have to figure out how to tell this story. I have to figure out to design the landing pages and all this kind of stuff. And I'm still at that stage where I don't have a functioning, I don't have these like world-class, powerful content team where if I just have any idea, they execute it like world-class thing. There's still things I uniquely need to be involved in and get it to a point where it's like, hey, do you get this? Check this out. This model's working. Can you guys scale this? Boom, easy. They can do that. That's one example where it took me 2 weeks of putting all other companies aside, sitting down, and now I have a functional model of what a sales funnel could look like for that business, or does look like, because it's functioning and generating revenue and like crazy returns. So now I can hand that to someone else and they can scale it. But building things is what I do. And so I went in and I did the research and I did the hard work, and the payoff is already paying off. Right. That's one example of something I put off for months. And there's dozens of other examples.
Of course.
But it required coding and work.
So said more broadly, it's the new initiative that you need to put the time in to figure out, that only you can figure out based on your research and your instincts and understanding of the business, so that it becomes a new integral part of the business on a day-to-day. And those are the kinds of places that only you can go, but that's the hardest place to go. So you have to emphasize that in your time allocation.
Yeah, I do. I need to emphasize this. And honestly, a lot of that work is stuff I didn't want to do. It just wasn't quick. It was going to be weeks and weeks and weeks. And I have to spend
building sales funnels. Been there. It's it takes
drudgery.
time. Yeah,
yes,
with you.
It does.
100%.
One funnel. So that is number 10. Number 11. I studied too wide a range of topics, which became shiny distractions from the core habits that had created my success in the first place.
Ooh.
So with this one, I've always been a hardcore studier and I've always embraced it as a good thing. But then I've always been guilty of a person who sees everything as an opportunity. And I see opportunities everywhere. And now that I have no time, those opportunities are not opportunities like they would have been when I had time. They're distractions. So I could do this, I could do that, I could do this, I could do that. It became like a mantra. And Jordan and I just had a 20-minute argument about an idea. I was like, well, yeah, but we should do it like this. And he's like, oh my God, no. And so it's a habit. And so I want to better control the stream of information flowing in and make sure that those are very topic focused for what I'm focusing on in that time for longer stretches of time. I want to achieve mastery in things. I don't want to be the jack of all trades, but I want to get as close to reality about where I'm at today while remaining a visionary who's primarily a positive and hopeful vision caster for what's coming in the future. So that was something that really set me back because I wound up biting off more than I could chew, and I accomplished par returns and subpar outcomes for what I was shocked that I just, like, when I do something, I perform. Like, it's better than average. Right. It like, I do things excellently, but there's so much I did so poorly this year.
The next one that you wrote down is almost like an articulation of that. Can you read that? Because I think it kind of dives into this even a little deeper and how it actually plays out practically.
I allowed my ambitions to exceed my abilities due to an inflated estimation of my abilities, which resulted in attempting lofty, long shot investments and strategies, and then expecting high degrees of success well outside of my or my team's area of competence. And that led to losses. So I think really, really important lesson to learn from that was that I'm extremely ambitious. I want it all, and I want it yesterday. I am Baruch Assault, basically, if you get that reference. But
I don't. Who is that?
Baruch Assault is the girl who's saying, like, what's that song? I want the world, I want the whole world, from Willy Wonka. She said,
oh my gosh.
It's wrap it all up in a locket. It's my bar of chocolate. Give it to me now.
Baruch Assault. Oh my god.
Baruch Assault. There you go. Yeah.
That's great.
So
that's great.
That character, I may not be a spoiled brat, but I'm incredibly
yeah, that's where the analogy falls apart. But the ambition part, I want it all. That is definitely you.
She was insanely ambitious. And so that ambition definitely exceeded my current capabilities. And so I don't want to be in a position where I'm taking a sailboat out and my ambition exceeds my abilities and people are harmed, right?
Yeah.
I want to live a life where I am strategic and I put the right things in the right people's seats or connect with the right people and the right teams who have the competency. I want to not get caught pretending or believing false things about myself. 14, I ignored reality and in turn delayed course correction when evidence was staring me in the face, costing me millions of dollars. So this is a sort of, I used to think this was like, rich people problem. When you are targeting high ticket clients, as I was as a hairstylist, there are certain problems that if you can solve fast, they'll just pay, because they don't have the time to quibble over small amounts of money. And in turn, they lose lots of small amounts of money by saying, just do it. Yeah, fine. 50 grand, whatever. Like, take it. 10 grand, whatever. Please just get it done. And I have so much on my plate and I'm so busy and my time's worth so much that you can kind of fall into this mentality where it's like, just, that's a little thing. I don't need to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So,
like taking an Uber because you're running late.
Yeah.
That's the middle class version of that. Like, I'm running late. I'll just take an Uber. It's fine. Yeah.
So like, it's easy for like somebody, if you can solve problems quickly and expeditiously and well, it's easy to take wealthy people's money because a large portion to you is a small portion to them. And so there's this disparity in that. And so this is a mindset that as I grow my businesses and as I grow my wealth and become a wealthier person, problems arise. And I just sort of was like, I'm so busy. That's like not even important. Like throw money at it. And I just wouldn't course correct. Like for example, I knew I was burning money on a marketing campaign and I knew I needed to go fix it, but I also knew I didn't know what was wrong with it. And it would take, there's the time to go dive into why that's not working. It was just kind of like crossed my fingers and hope that spending $2,000 a day on this thing would just somehow pan out. Right?
Mm-hmm.
That is dumb.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was irresponsible and slow to respond because I had no white space on my calendar, and every problem that got thrown at me was just like, it's not one of my goals. Get it off my plate. And so I was very irresponsible and slow to respond to things that needed obvious fixing. So I delayed course correction. And this year, we're doing things differently already. In one of my businesses, we implemented an end of day report. So there's certain teams get together at the end of the day and they go over daily numbers so that we know exactly, like a sports game measures to like, okay, score, go, boom, it goes up on the board. We know whether we're behind or ahead. We're not waiting until the end of the week or the end of the month, right? So now we are measuring things more closely, meaningful things. We're not just measuring garbage. We're measuring very meaningful things that if those numbers are off, there's a plan of action in place already. So that is being more proactive this year. And we're going to be more proactive and respond to things that we expect to happen by measuring and being notified right away. Just like if I'm in the hospital, I want those monitors go off, right? The nurses run in, like, right? You hear a beep, like, and something happens right away. These businesses are all of these people's lives, all these team members, all these employees. This is funding their life. You should absolutely have a heart monitor on these things that notifies you the second something's not going right.
Yes.
And we're treating it more urgently this year. So that was number 14. Number 15, I compromised my standards for who belongs in my business and who doesn't. That was a huge one. I mean, that was just purely on crazy ambition and fast and not high standards.
Right.
And so
grow the team, as you said earlier,
Yeah, just grow. Huge mistake. No, you focus on certain things specifically before you scale. And we failed to realize how unorganized we were when sudden growth put pressure on one of my businesses. And that pressure cracked a lot of things. We hired a lot of people. Payroll went up and then the people aren't producing. And so it threw the whole business into a state of reaction. Everybody was like, fix this, fix that. But now that that's not working, well, how do we know that? We'll like test it for a week. Is that it was chaos. And because we hired the wrong people, everyone else had to chip in and sort of like, how do we get these people working? How do we get this to work? It was a big mistake. So now we have core teams of like phenomenal people. There's not a person on this team who I don't like, I would not go to battle with. 16, I failed to generate the level of clarity I had when I was broke. So when I was broke, I had this specific feeling of like, I know what I want. I know where I'm going. I know what I'm doing. And I feel like a charge to get there. I could see it. I'm going to become a hairstylist and I'm going to be the best hairstylist I can be. And I'm going to make $100,000 a year. And I'm going to do that in less than 5 years. And I'm going to go to New York to start my career there. And then there was this level of clarity that I had achieved when I was broke, that now that I had multiple businesses and lots of people, I sort of lost that clarity because I was the fire department in my businesses and just respond, react. And so I was like, oh, I look up and I'm like, okay, so where are we going? And it's like, that's my job. I'm supposed to be saying
only you can set that direction. Where when you're an army of one and when your goal is have a job and build a career, I would argue this is something everyone can relate to. It's when you're starting out, things are simpler, and you can have that level of clarity and you can push hard and, getting that first promotion or getting to raise your rates or getting to work on a celebrity client for the first time. I remember there's a time when the biggest thing in my world was just, I want to work on feature films. How do I get on the set of a feature film? And so you have a lot of clarity when these goals are simple, but then as you grow and as your opportunities become more abundant and as your projects become more complicated, it's easy to lose that.
17 was my mind was disorganized, and in turn, so were my businesses. My businesses were a very clear, direct reflection of my brain, of where it was at and how I was feeling and how I was thinking. It was like a mirror. It was crazy how the businesses reflected the way I was. 18, I split my time between too many types of tasks, lowering my personal growth rate in any single competency. So because I split between tasking is something that drug me down. So what I'm doing this year is I'm setting a couple new rules in place. I'm eliminating all tabs from my screen if I'm working on a screen project, which a lot of my time is on screens now. I'm eliminating all tabs from site that are not directly correlated to the project I am working on in that moment. I am removing.
This is a very practical thing, because I have taken over your screen many times during recording sessions, and you always have it's like 5 different topics going on, and I'll be like, all right, can you share your screen with me? And it's like, whoa.
Yeah, it's a battle station for sure. And I have like a grid, so I have like 2 monitors. One of them is a giant, like curved 50-inch monitor that has like 3 to 4 windows on it at a given time, and then my monitor below that has 4 different quadrants of windows on it of like WhatsApp, Slack, chat, email, text. And so that I can respond. I've got construction teams and like content teams, and there's so much needing approval, and like things stop moving sometimes if I'm not involved, which is a major problem in the business.
It's
like
so
I said,
hard.
I'm supposed to be the vision component, not the babysitter. So I am closing those, working on a project that I think is meaningful work. And then I am time blocking that, and then moving to, when I complete that, the time block that I set aside, I can go kind of check in with everybody and make sure that things can move forward. And yes, there will be some consequences until I can get the right management in place. 19.
We're on the last one. This is it. This is the big one, by the way. I think this is the biggest, most interesting one.
Oh, interesting. Okay. When things didn't work, I became frustrated and grappled for control, creating an addiction to winning, which took my focus away from meaningful work and big wins that take time and produce real results, and placed my actions towards small, easy, and meaningless wins just so I could get the high of a win. This resulted in a habit of focusing on small emotional payoffs, sacrificing real growth. Now, why do you say this is the most important to you?
Well, because because everyone experiences this at one level or another. Like, look, why do people go on Instagram instead of whatever it is that they're supposed to be spending time doing? Why do people go on Bejeweled on their iPhone? You get a dopamine hit from winning, and whether the winning in your case, because you're not a particularly distracted person in that more traditional sense, but the winning for you might be closing a deal. The winning for you might be increasing sales of a particular product in your e-commerce business. The win for you might be, something we're doing here at the Millionaire Hairstylist. And so there's a dynamic there, which is, when in moments of doubt, it's just easy to chase the dopamine. It's easy to chase the win. Yeah. And if you can go somewhere, this is why Instagram works. This is why TikTok works. This is why YouTube works. It is a reward mechanism. It's a gamified reward mechanism that preys on our need to win, our need to feel like we got something, like we gained something. And so I think everyone relates to this. It's like, I sacrifice the big wins, the hard wins, the long wins, the win that take patience for whatever that short-term win might be. Again, whether that's scrolling on a phone, which is obviously like the worst kind of a win because you're not getting anything in real for it, or it might just be, I'm just going to go do that thing that I know how to do and get paid every hour for. And I'm going to do that instead of figuring out how to buy the property that I really should be figuring out how to buy, or instead of growing a business and hiring more people. Whatever that arbitrage looks like between the easy win and the big win, that's such a hard gravity to escape.
It is. It's an addiction, for sure. It is. You ever seen there's a show on HBO called The 100-Foot Wave. And my wife and I are watching it right now. And you can very clearly see why someone would want to do this. It's very similar. To hit a win and to surf. I've been surfing, I've been kite surfing. And it's an incredible rush when you catch a wave. And then that feeling is like, whoa, what a win. I want to do it again. I want to do it again. Mm-hmm. And now that starts to wear off and get a little boring. And so you want to go a little bigger and a little bigger and bigger and bigger. And soon there's no wave in the world that's big enough or deadly enough that's going to get you that feeling. Every year I go to Spain and do the running of the bulls. And I can tell the people who are there.
Let me just put an emphasis on that for people who have not heard the podcast in a while. And I don't know if we've ever actually addressed this on the podcast. You actually run with the bulls. Let's be clear. This is the kind of person you are. You actually go in the streets of Pamplona or wherever you go and run with the angry, crazy bulls that gore people. So let's just Just to say that out loud, make sure everyone's clear what we're talking about. Please continue your story.
Yeah, maybe I can add a 20 that's just like, don't be dumb.
Stick to cruises with sloths in tropical places.
Yeah, exactly. But it's very obvious. There's a group of people there that come back every year, and there is an obvious, in many of them, a reason why they come and do it, no matter how old they get or how risky it gets. They want to get closer to the horns. They want to run. They won't stop, and no matter how dangerous or how many times they've been gored, right? And they're risking their life. And this is kind of akin to what it's like, but you go and you get a little win, and you want to do more, and you want to do more, and you want to do more, and then you start to lose sight of the meaning, and you start to lose sight of what was important and why this was started and why you're doing it, and then more meaningful things come along, and you're like, I don't want to do that right now because I'm about to win this, like just this next level, right? I'm going to go do this because that's where I'm comfortable winning, and I know I'm going to get that hit. So I think there's something in human nature, and especially as your businesses grow and they become more risky, and this is for certain personalities, but founders, they have a high tolerance for risk. So it's like, ooh, okay, I think, like put $250,000 toward that. That sounds like a good idea. It's like, hey, you should, check yourself for whether you're just like chasing a quick, like, I think like if we did that, then if we spent that, then we could do this and we could get here. And it's like, have a good degree of skepticism toward about yourself and your ability to chase meaningless things just because they're easy or they sound good. And I did a lot of that last year. Addicted to quick wins.
I think the anecdote to that, which is a concept that we don't, I would argue this is something we don't talk about a lot, but we probably should, is, and is just a truism of building any business, is patience. Good things take time. Building things that are successful take time. And there's a balance, because you don't want complacency. You don't want to be sitting around going like, well, we never did actually, if you were, when you got into real estate, if you had been doing it for 5 years and like, I never actually have bought a property, but one of these days, like, that's obviously not an appropriate place to be in. But at the same time, I think real estate being a good example, I'm sure there are low-hanging fruit that you could go after, or that you could steer your entire team towards, that is not as valuable as a multifamily unit that you want to take down. You can go chase a squirrel while you really should be chasing the elephant. And again, it's hard for me to say exactly what that should be in your situation, but I think for anyone's business, it's like, what is the thing in 2024 that's just going to make you feel good when you do it? I mean, for me, Cash, it's not that it's a bad thing. It's like, I like posting on Instagram every day. I get to post, it gets results, you get likes, you get that little thing, that we were talking about on our Instagram episode about the dopamine that Instagram gives you as the poster. So it's like, that's valuable, but it's like, okay, but that's not the big win. You have to go focus on the big wins. You have to go focus on what those things are, and don't replace the big wins with just a bunch of small wins, because, well, it just feels good to win.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to do. A very hard thing to do, especially to break an addiction means you have to completely change the way that you operate your environment. And so I think this year, the strategy that I'm using, that I've outlined for myself, is to have an extremely high degree of clarity on what I hope to accomplish this year in each business and for myself personally, and then lay out the strategies and the action plan for what we believe is most meaningful to help us accomplish that mission. And then define my role, my wills and won'ts. Like, what do I do in this? What is my role in these strategies? And what are the things that I am going to do? And when you're not doing the work, it's very easy to put together a workout plan. It's going to the gym and sticking to the plan that is the hard part. But having a plan is, you are way more likely to stick to it than going to the gym and being like, all right, so what should I do today? Right?
Yeah, 100%.
Like, what am I doing tomorrow? Leg day, arm day? I don't know. I have no idea, but I'm going to go and we'll figure it out. Like, you're not going to go as often. So having a plan, having a clear strategy in place, and your role in that plan, like the things that you will and you won't do, I think is going to give a greater degree of clarity this year for what I'm going to do. And then it gives it a greater degree of clarity for where I'm going to need help. And then I can effectively communicate that to my team. Like, do we need to hire more? Who can take this on? That kind of stuff.
I think you're set up to have a crazy successful 2024. And I think this level of introspection, I think it's fair to say that despite the massive disruption that it made into your work life, for 7 days in January, the cruise was worth it. I think Coco is right, as usual.
As usual, gosh. But yeah, I think that the reflection time was really good. I think it'll be helpful. I'll be picking a few of these. I've already mentioned, I've picked a few of these to really target this year to improve on. And
yes,
I'm picking strategies, like not just like crossing my fingers and hope it happens. Each one of these has a specific strategy that's doable, like eliminating the tabs and removing the chat and closing down all chat platforms when I'm working on projects. So that's just an example, but we'll see what 2024 carries. I would love for you guys to, go over to Instagram, like DM me, or just let me know did any of these help you? Did you find them useful? Did you relate to any of them? I would love to know that I'm not the only one who had like 19 major fails in 2023.
Let's hear it. Thanks, everyone. If you're a hairstylist, if you're a creative professional, and you are interested in your financial well-being, remember to like and subscribe so that more episodes just like this one show up in your YouTube feed.